Welcome back, dram fans. I've got quite a few of these English Whisky Company bottles on the go at the moment, and I decided to review some of them both before I finish them and before they go out of stock. Because as with almost everything from the English Whisky Company, I think that a lot of them are rather good. So as of the 30th of June 2024, this is still in stock at the English Whisky Company's own website and various other places. This is the English Whisky Company Red Range Virgin Oak. So part of the Red Range, as they call it at the English Whisky Company, you've basically got three tiers when you're looking for an English Whisky Company product. You've got the basic stuff, which runs at about £40-45, and they tend to be 43%, and there's not many of them. You've got an unpeated, a peated, a sherried, and you've also got the 11-year-old, which is mostly bourbon matured. It's obviously the only one of the basic core range that has an age statement, and I believe it's a slightly higher ABV. And they're all good value for money. And then you get your small batch range on top of that, which, as the name suggests, it's bottled in limited quantities, and they tend to be very small batches and things that are maybe a little bit more experimental, different cask types, and they're things that the English Whisky Company have vatted to showcase a specific style of whisky that they've made. And then on top of that you get this red range, which is single cask and cask strength releases, of which there are usually at least a couple of these available at any one time. And on top of that, they're not even distillery exclusives. You can go on the website right now, or various websites wherever you get your whisky, and you should be able to find somewhere that has these, which I think is amazing. On top of that, you have got some really expensive stuff, which I think is normally bottled as Founders Reserve, including the recent 15 and 16-year-old English whiskies, and they are all utterly superb and utterly more than I want to pay. So today we're going to be looking at this one, which does run at the price of £85. The Red Range, they generally seem to be around that price point. They don't vary too much, which is a lot of money, and it's going to put some people off, and that's fair. I get that. I kind of agree. But you do have to consider that this is single cask, cask strength, ultra small batch, and just when it comes to whiskey from the English Whisky Company, this stuff, without paying a fortune, is really about the epitome of the quality that you're going to get, and they are well worth a look. So this one that we've got today, it, as the label says, it is chosen by Mark Rundle, who is one of the tour guides at the English Whisky Company, and he has been for quite a few years. It is from a refill virgin oak cask, which was actually selected by Mark Rundle himself. It's bottled at an ABV of 57.8%. It's from cask number B20897. It has a phenol count of 0, so it's completely unpeated. It was distilled in August 2013 and disgorged from the casks in July 2023. So this one's been around for nearly a year. You might have realised though that the difference between those dates, between the distillation and the bottling, is 9 years and 11 months. You kind of could have waited a few more days, made it 10, couldn't you? I think I would have done. But the good folk at the English Whisky Company, they obviously made the decision that it wasn't important and bottled this at 9 years and 11 months. It's worth noting and thinking about the cask type that they've used on this one. Refill virgin oak. And more to the point, how the hell can something be refill virgin oak? We're used to virgin oak meaning a cask that hasn't been previously used at all, but this is refill, so it has been used before. So I think what they're really saying with this one is that this used to be a virgin oak cask, and you might think that that describes almost all casks used for whiskey, but I think what they're trying to emphasise here is that unlike the majority casks used for Scotch and English whiskey, this was never a bourbon cask. A more accurate description of the cask used for this one might be refill English whiskey, but I guess from that some people might assume that it's been used for bourbon and then English whiskey and then English whiskey again, which I don't think is the case. So yeah, in a way, this is refill and virgin oak, in that it was originally a virgin oak cask, a bespoke cask made out of American white oak. It was used the first time for English whiskey, And now this whiskey here is from the second maturation from that cask. Simples, right? Kind of, I think. So let's get some in the glass. And what glass am I using today? I hear you say. It is my retro from the previous branding, English Whisky Company. Usual fantastic presentation for the English Whisky Company red range, or it's the same as what they use for the small batch as well, decanter style bottling with a big chunky stopper. Fantastic for keeping and reusing as an infinity bottle. English Whisky Company red range virgin oak cask on the nose. Woody, as you might expect, lots of oak spice, quite a bit of vanilla, but not overly spicy, and I would guess that's because this is a second fill cask, so it's had a little bit of the oak spice edge taken off it from the previous maturation. Quite sour and fruity, a little bit of a sour lime note on the nose. Jelly sweets, wine gums, a little bit of popcorn, and oddly a little bit of a chocolatiness on the nose of this one. And I'm not sure if that's coming through directly from the oak itself or if it's coming from the barrel char. But amongst the fruity lime notes, I'm getting a little bit of a dark chocolate cocoa note, as well as a little bit of a putty plasticine note. Nice dollop of floral oak, and a little bit of a slightly herbal, floral, potpourri note. So lots of oakiness and lots of barley spirit notes as well. Let's see how it tastes. The colour of that, you'd believe me if I told you it was wild turkey or something, wouldn't you? It does look very bourbonish, the colour. On the palate again, lots of dense, chewy, oaky notes, more of that lime, lots and lots of bright spiritiness, lots of juicy oak, a little bit of a sweet popcorn note on the palate, which again is something that I would associate with a bourbon. Also lots of caramel, moving on to that same sour, limey, sour fruitiness. Very, very fruity though, very fruity and estery, which probably betrays the quality and time and attention and the length of fermentation that they've applied to this. Oaky, sour and fruity, malty, and lots of toasted grains. As for the finish, let's have one more sip. Oaky, long finish, bright and fruity, with more of that sour lime. Overall, I think it would be fair to say that my judgment of this one is simple but pleasant, and about as oaky as you would expect without being too over oaked. I think that the spirit stands up to the cask really nicely with this one. And it's also interesting to see that a refill English whisky cask appears to leave more of the oak intact in some ways than an actual ex-bourbon cask does. Or, another way of looking at it, perhaps it's just a case that the spirit of this maturation is more in tune and more similar to the previous maturation. Obviously with the previous cask contents from this cask also being English whisky. I think that this one is absolutely worth trying as a bar pour if you ever see it, solely for that reason, that it is, despite being a slightly simple, straightforward whisky, when you think about it and when you actually try it, it's actually kind of a unique thing. A very interesting and fairly rare spirit from the English Whisky Company. Something that I would absolutely love to know about this one is what the first fill of this cask actually was, because English Whisky Company, they don't just make single malt, they also make a wide range of grain whiskies of various definitions. So I think that that is probably something that they should have given us more information on, especially when you consider that this is £85 and the selling point is that it is a refill virgin oak cask. I feel that they really should have given us more information about what that was. I do wonder if the first fill might have been one of those grain whiskies, but really I am guessing. I was tempted to ask the English Whisky Company, but honestly I'm kind of tired of getting nowhere with them. And that might just be because it's my local distillery, and obviously, like yourselves, I'm a whiskey enthusiast, and I'm curious, and I have lots of questions. But the English Whisky Company is the only craft whisky distillery that I've ever been to, and I regularly ask questions, fairly straightforward questions, and I get the responses of, "Oh, we're not allowed to say," or "Oh, I don't have the information to answer that," or the old evergreen favourite, "That's a company secret." When you're just asking things like what cask types have gone into a vatting or the year of distillation. Because it is 2024 now, and most craft distilleries are trying to encourage enthusiasm and curiosity, and it's just a little frustration that I personally have had with the English Whisky Company, that it is sometimes hard to get information out of them, and that does make me feel like taking my money elsewhere sometimes. Just imagine if you went to, say, Springbank Distillery and asked them what type of sherry casks they used for their 15-year-old, and they said, "Oh, I don't know." And that was the end of that. It just wouldn't happen. In some ways, I do think that English whisky has some catching up to do, and with most of the English whisky distilleries, or most of the distilleries in England, I should say, I don't think it's a matter of catching up with quality, but I think that for a lot of them there is catching up to do in terms of transparency and nurturing the very passionate and curious enthusiasts that we have appreciating whisky of all kinds now. While we're on that subject, I am pleased to see that the red range now seems to have solid boxes, no gaps in them, which is something that I've criticised them before about, and I like to think that I played a part in that, but probably not. Because if they were going to do that, they would have probably put natural colouring on the label or the box somewhere. It does say non-chill filtered on the back of this one. And I have had information from the English Whisky Company that all of their whisky is non-chill filtered natural colour. But until they actually put it on the box or the label, we're never going to be able to know if they decide to start doing any of those horrible things. So it does matter, it does need to be on the label. We've got some of the information on the box for this one, which is good. Nearly there. So who is this whisky for? The obvious suggestion is that it's an excellent English whisky for a bourbon drinker, and I think that's fair. I think that anyone that appreciates things like some of the better or mid to upper level bourbons will really get on with this. I think that, and this is not really a surprise, I think that this has more in common with quality craft bourbon than it does with Scotch whisky or even English whisky. I think that you'll probably like this one if you like things like your Wild Turkey 101, your Jack Daniel's Bonded, Jack Daniel's Single Barrel, and Elijah Craig, things like that. The obvious problem, and you can probably guess what I'm going to say, you can get 2 bottles of Wild Turkey or Jack Daniel's Bonded for the same price as this. And while I think that this is a really interesting and worth a try whisky, I think that it's going to be a serious problem when this style of whisky has such low-priced and excellently made and excellent value for money alternatives. When you consider that bourbon and a lot of American whisky is essentially virgin oak cask whisky, there is stiff competition for this stuff. And when you consider that if you're a UK drinker, those kind of mid-range offerings in the bourbon world like Wild Turkey 101 and Jack Daniel's Bonded in particular, they are quite often on offer as well. So that turns that 2 bottles for the same price as this into 3 bottles. True, none of them are as craft and well presented and lovingly made as this one. Things like Wild Turkey 101 and some of your Jack Daniels, they are putting them out at like 50% in, we can assume, pretty large batches. This one here, 57.8%, so it is a step up both in terms of ABV, intensity of flavour, and the craft presentation. I do think that this stuff is better than something like a Wild Turkey 101, but the problem is that it's not 2 to 3 times better. And when you're talking about price, that makes this one a little bit of a hard sell. So bearing that in mind, why did I even buy this? Honestly, I didn't. My dad did, and I think he kind of got bored of it and gave it to me. And honestly, myself as well, it's not the kind of thing that I could go through a whole bottle of without getting bored of either. But I was given about 3/4 of a bottle of this, and I've obviously spent quite a bit of time with it, and I've really enjoyed it. It surprised me because I tried this before my dad bought it, and I thought, it's good, but it's not really the kind of thing that I want. But as I have persevered with it and given it some time, I have enjoyed it quite a lot. It's the kind of thing that you can enjoy going back to occasionally. I think that it's important to keep that sense of novelty with something like this and break it up a little bit with other things. Saying that, I'm going to go out there and say that this is probably one of the best bourbon style spirits that I've ever had. But for me, as a Scotch and English whiskey drinker, it's just the simplicity of it, the simplicity of the design brief of what they're trying to achieve with this one is just a little bit lacking in complexity, and it doesn't quite have the nuance that I'm accustomed to. And as I said before, I just think there are too many cheaper alternatives in this style, and also too many more interesting expressions from this distillery for me to want to go out and spend my own hard-earned on this. If this does sound good to you though, by all means claim your bottle now, because it is single cask and there obviously aren't many bottles of this around. I don't actually know if it tells you how many bottles there were. 228. Which tells you something, that this stuff is single cask, it's been out for a year, and it's still available. And I've talked about this before, it's great that these special releases from the English Whisky Company do hang around for so long, but it's also kind of sad that these ultra small batches aren't more popular. People don't talk about them, because while I didn't absolutely love this one, I would say 2/3 of the red range from English Whisky are absolute belters, and people just don't buy them. People don't talk about whiskey from the English Whisky Company like they do about small releases from Scottish distilleries, or even from English distilleries like Bimber and Cotswolds. For whatever reason, even though I think they're probably the best English whisky distillery these days, they just don't generate the same level of hype. So yeah, if this does sound good to you, if it sounds like the kind of thing that you would enjoy, by all means get yours while you still can. But while I've really enjoyed this one, and I'm going to enjoy finishing it, not all today, I probably won't be buying a second bottle. Let me know what you think about this one, and what you think about the slightly odd design brief of this one, that it is a refill virgin oak cask. Does that sound interesting to you? Does that sound like it's something worth doing? Let me know what you think. I'm going to go off and enjoy finishing the rest of this glass. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time, and cheers.